Hello again, everybody. I am Nathan Boyles, County Commissioner here in Okaloosa County for District 3. I have with me Mr. Tony Hughes of Hughes Consulting Group. Hey, Tony. And Stephen Perkins, our CPA friend over at Warren Averett. We are here today, and this is the second part of a three-part series to kind of help walk some of our small businesses through the various forms of economic assistance that are out there right now in response to the COVID-19 epidemic. In our first series, we covered the Paycheck Protection Program and the application of that loan process, which is made directly through your local lender, provided that they're approved by the SBA. We're now moving on to what is really a kind of a refresh of the original disaster business loan that the SBA provides in hurricanes, earthquakes, any declared disaster. That program has been modified and is now called the EIDL.
That's correct.
And we're going to learn a little bit about that program, about the $10,000 component that's been much talked about, and then how those items, or that loan, if you were awarded those dollars, how that may interact if you've also made application under the Paycheck Protection Program. So with that, Tony,
all right,
take it away.
Thank you, Nathan. All right, so the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is a program that's directly through the SBA. We talked in the first video about the Paycheck Protection Program. These two loans kind of work together, whereas the PPP is sort of more of a short-term help out with payroll, help keep people off of unemployment. The EIDL, the EIDL loan, is really more for your long-term solution to the problems that you've experienced for your business from this disruption that we've had with the coronavirus.
And the Paycheck Protection Program did not require specific economic loss, whereas the EIDL, if you're approved for the loan, does. Yeah. So a narrower group of businesses, in theory, that will be applying.
Yeah. So just as a quick overview, what Nathan says is exactly correct. PPP, short-term, EIDL, kind of a long-term, and it is a function of your economic injury from this, so there is an additional calculation that's involved. It's a little bit more complicated. There is underwriting involved here. The SBA, somebody with the SBA, a pair of eyes with the SBA is going to be looking at this application. They're going to be looking at your credit history. They're going to be looking at your business, the past history, the past performance of the business, and the likelihood that that with this loan and let this business get back on its feet again, that the long-term prospects for repayment are good. Okay. So it's a little bit different than what the PPP is. There is some debt forgiveness in this, we'll get into. You talked about the $10,000 grant. It's important to note that you can't have forgiveness on both loans. So you need to look in to see where you're going to get the most amount of forgiveness from. $10,000 for EIDL. If your PPP is only going to be like $5,000, you may want to just forget about a PPP and go with the EIDL loan, because the $10,000 grant does come in fairly quickly, and it is supposed to be paid within just a few days of making your application with the SBA. And even if you're not approved for your EIDL loan, you get to keep the $10,000. So that's the main headline for this program.
Okay, good.
All right, the SBA has made. I just touched my face. I shouldn't have done that. Sorry. I'll get some email about that.
For everybody watching at home, we're doing our best, and I will give Tony credit. He did come in with the obligatory CDC recommended face mask.
Absolutely.
And we're doing our best to maintain social distancing here in the studio.
Yes, we are. The SBA puts out a PowerPoint for this. I'm going to just kind of run through it because it's actually pretty well done. And if you just hit my screen, there you go. These funds come directly from the U.S. Treasury. You do not go through a bank for this, and you apply. It is an online application.
And that's at the SBA website?
At the SBA.
Just Google it, or is it SBA.gov?
Disasterloan.sba.gov.
There we go.
But there's a lot of ways to get to it. You can go to the Treasury Department's website, and there's a red banner up on top that has, COVID-19 response. Click it, it will take you to this application as well.
Is it fair, though, to make sure folks are going to a reputable, if you're going to Google it, make sure you're going to a .gov and being very careful?
Yeah, really just SBA.gov, Treasury.gov, those are the websites that you want to. Now you can, like the SBDC, UWF has this on here, but these links are all legitimate. Okay. But this is where you actually get the application, and it is an online application. So just some of the highlights, the maximum unsecured loan is $25,000. If your loan's over $25,000, they are going to be looking for some collateral. Now they say they will not turn your loan down for a lack of collateral, but okay, let's put the two. It's like you got to have collateral. You need to be prepared to have something to offer. Let me move my mouse, sorry. The loan amounts here up to $2 million. 3.75% for a small business. Again, nonprofits are eligible for this, just like the PPP. Nonprofits borrow at 2.75%. Terms are up to 30 years. You can use it really for any business use to help pay your debts, to help make your payroll, to pay accounts payable, bills that were not paid, that from the PPP, for instance. Here's the list of who all is eligible. It's almost everybody. Again, there are some businesses that, if you're too large or if you're in like gambling or, illegal operations, obviously can't. But including, but it does help.
And strip clubs, if I recall correctly,
you're out of luck.
They're out of luck. So they're legal, but they are disqualified from applying for this loan. And I say that jokingly, but there are some businesses that need to pay attention.
Well, casinos, as I understand, bingo halls, if they're getting it from gambling, there are some that are not eligible to apply. And I'll just let you. And here's the ones that are not eligible for application. Here's an interesting thing: if you're a 50% or greater owner and you're more than 6 days behind in child support, you can't apply.
Interesting.
You're ineligible. So, but I'll let you just kind of go through the screen there, and you can pause it and look at these things a lot longer as you're watching the video. So credit history and the ability to repay, those are the main criteria for approval of a loan like this.
For the underlying loan. Now we have to be careful, and I think really, make sure folks understand that there's this part of this, was it the CARES Act, created this $10,000 that's supposed to be funded to businesses who simply apply and request that funding, whether or not their underlying application for the loan itself is actually approved.
That is correct.
Do I have that right?
That is
and that almost sounds like it's it would be untrue or it's a scam, but as best we can tell, that's in fact was the intention of the underlying legislation.
The legislation actually says it has to be that first $10,000 has to be funded within 3 days of the application. I know several businesses that have applied for this. It's been well over a week, and they haven't seen their $10,000 yet.
Okay.
But I'm going to go back to be patient. There's a lot trying to go through this pipe, and that they're not really ready for. So I have to presume they're going to get to it.
What, Stephen, have you had any of your clients who have actually been funded on this one yet?
Not funded. I've had several that have applied and not clarified whether they've received any.
Okay.
So you see here the ineligible uses, you can't pay dividends, you can't refinance long-term debt. It's strictly just to help cover the economic injury that your business suffered. But you can pay the bills that you would be paying had the economic injury not occurred, you can pay those bills. Of course, this is where you can't get assistance from partners. Again, this is their website. This is where you go, disasterloan.sba.gov. All right, so here's the first page, and I will see if I can't actually get to. All right, so when you go to the disasterloan.sba.gov, this is really the first page that you're going to see, and you see the big red box here that says apply here. So once you apply there, once you press that button, this is where you go. Oh, I lost my place. Hang on. Sorry, too much stuff up here. Here we go. All right, so this is what you see. After you press that button, it takes you to the streamlined process requirements. And really just go through here and you select, well, what am I? Am I a small business, big business, small business, etc. So just pick where you are and select. It takes you through these. These are the actual pages that come off of the website. So review and check all the following. These again kind of remind you of what you can't be involved with and still be eligible. Other information required. You're going to need your gross revenues. You're going to need your cost of goods sold. For rental property owners, with your lost rents, your cost of operating expenses if you're a nonprofit, any other reimbursement you're going to get, like if you happen to have business interruption insurance, you're going to have to disclose there, what money you're expecting to get from your insurance company to cover it. Of course, I've heard a lot of insurance companies are not covering it.
That's right.
Which is another topic for another video. And then, of course, the number of employees. Some of this is getting kind of small, but I'll make this a little bit bigger. Just more information about this is trying to determine your eligibility. And you can just see what those questions are and answer them as appropriate. This is where we talked about the advance. All right, so the PPP and the EIDL, you can have one debt forgiveness, but you can't have both. So if you've already applied for a PPP, you can't get the $10,000 advance on the EIDL. And this is where you would say, you would just leave that box there unchecked to say, I do not want to be considered for the future advance because I'm already getting my debt forgiveness from the PPP, assuming the PPP is over $10,000.
And so, this is where we had an interesting discussion before we started the video here today, because, so from my view, and I maybe tend to be, more of a risk taker, but certainly if I've got a small business out there, my revenue has dried up, I've got employees who I'm trying to keep them, with a paycheck so that they can feed their families, I would be shooting every piece of ammunition that I had.
Sure.
And so, what would happen, let's say I do, because we don't know how long that PPP loan is going to take to ultimately get processed and approved. We think it's going to be fast, but what would be the ramifications to a small business owner who does fill out both of these applications today and checks that box? No one, I understand you're not going to go to jail if you do that. You're just going to have to then offset that $10,000 when it comes time for the PPP payback.
Well, my recommendation, number one, would be if you've already filed for the PPP, don't check the box.
Sure.
Because the PPP is going to get money to you faster than EIDL will, even the $10,000 grant. I mean, I do believe. Well, let's face it. I
You've
know.
Got faith in the banks, don't
Well,
you?
I know people. Well, yeah, I do have faith in the banks. I know they're going to be getting these things processed fairly quickly. I do know the people that filed for this Monday a week ago, so it's been probably 9 business days now. Well, it's been 9 days, or probably let's call it 7 business days, that don't have their $10,000 advance.
Sure.
I do believe that the PPP will be turning those loans around faster than 7 days.
Okay.
So, and they've got more applications to deal with at the SBA now than they had, a week and a half ago.
Certainly.
So, my recommendation would be, if you're already getting PPP and it's more than $10,000, don't check the box.
Understood.
Now, there is a way. Once dust starts to settle, once you file for your debt forgiveness on your PPP, if you did get the $10,000 advance, you do have to net that out of whatever you're getting forgiven for on the PPP. It's a lot more complicated, frankly, if you do it that way.
Sure.
And I understand where you're coming from, but I would personally, if I've applied for the PPP, and I was honest with my answers to their questions, you're going to get the PPP. That's going to be there, and it's going to be there faster than EIDL would be.
Okay.
And I would recommend just not checking the box. What do you think about that, Stephen?
I'd agree, and I'd say if you've applied for the EIDL before the PPP, there's a disclosure requirement on that application that you have to check the box that you've applied for EIDL. Yep. So you need to make sure that you're doing that.
And to be clear, that doesn't mean you don't want to apply for EIDL. It just means you may not want to request the $10,000.
That's exactly right.
Because EIDL is a source of low interest, long-term capital.
Money. That's right.
The expectation being that it may take you a while for your business to recover, and you need a way to get those dollars now.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So these blanks, every time you fill one of these blanks out, like the bank name, the account, this is where your money is going to go. This is where the $10,000 is going to go, or whatever. But every time you complete that little red strip turns green. So that's how you know that you've answered the question correctly, and you obviously want to make sure all the red's gone. So then, as you get deeper into the application, they may ask you for these SBA forms. These SBA forms are there's a link to the forms. You can pull the forms up. Again, they can be filled out online and submitted. This application, for the most part, is designed to be completely online. You can print stuff out and mail it in. I don't recommend it. I recommend go ahead and send it.
And is the portal, I've heard various stories about portals being overwhelmed. Do we know, is this one functioning now?
This one has crashed a couple of times since it first rolled out last week. My understanding is right now it's working.
Okay.
Now, that's the last I heard that it's working.
Okay. And I've heard actually the time of day you make application can make a difference. Yeah. And so,
Well, that's probably kind of the internet in general right now.
Sure.
So many people are at home streaming movies that the whole internet's being clogged up right now.
So maybe middle of the night, 2 a.m. might be your best bet to try and get this application funded.
We can go through some of the forms too, but like I said, this will likely be requested, and the next forms may be requested, including your federal income tax returns, a current year-to-date profit and loss statement, and any other these SBA forms that talk about the monthly sales figures. Like I said, this is a more complicated application than what the PPP. If you watch the PPP video, the PPP was like a page and a half. EIDL has more stuff in it. The advice: take your time, make sure things are complete. So here's what happened, and this is why it's important to get things done correctly, because if there is an error in your application, guess what? It's going to the back of the line. They're going to send you an email that says, hey, you need to send me X to fix this. but you've lost your place in the queue now.
Okay.
And once you do fix it, it's just going to be much longer. So it really does pay, I think, to make sure it's correctly filled out. And this is something, and not necessarily trying to pitch, me or Stephen here, but this is where you don't have to have, professional help, but this is an area where you may want to look into getting some professional help, because, if you do make a mistake, it could really extend the length of time that it takes to get your loan processed and approved.
And so tell me about fees. Do we have a similar issue with this one, with fees being either offset or paid by the government?
No, this is out of your back pocket.
Okay.
This will be out of your back pocket. So anyway, just some more information here. You do have, if you are denied, you've got up to 6 months to provide new information, submit a written request for reconsideration. They're only looking at your loss exposure or your economic injury for the next 6 months. So basically you would take from probably March, or at least mid-March, if you're a restaurant, probably mid-March is when things kind of went off the rails. Then you would look 6 months out, and then you calculate really what those economic injuries are. Steve, you want to talk about some things that would be considered economic injury that they would use?
Significant declines in revenue for a comparable quarter. That's most of the clarification that I've been seeing online. Is you'll see drastic decreases in sales and for comparable quarters of last year when coronavirus was not an issue.
Are you able to make that? So we obviously, none of us can know what's happening in 6 months from now. I'm having trouble knowing what's going to happen tomorrow right now in the current environment. But are you able to assume, kind of, if I've had losses for the last 2 weeks, can I assume that those losses are going to continue for that 6 month period?
Yes.
Okay.
That's all you can do.
Okay.
If you have last year's information, that's usually a good indication of what the current year was going to look like. I mean, if you started off, December, January, February, you were 10% up for the same period of time last year, I would factor that increase, that 10% increase, into the next 6 months as well.
Okay.
It's not just necessarily sales; it's really probably more your gross profits. I mean, if you're like a manufacturing company and you're manufacturing widgets, and the raw material to buy a widget, you're selling a widget for $10 and the raw material costs $2. Well, your gross profit's $8. Well, the 8 is really what your economic injury probably is. It's not so much the cost of the product. I mean, would you agree with that? You might not necessarily be able to say, well, I want my whole sales back as economic injury, because some of those sales you had to pay some money out to get those sales.
Sure. Yeah.
But the injury to your business is the gross profit, because that's how you're paying salaries, that's how you're paying utilities, how you're making your mortgage payments and whatnot. So I would probably tend to more focus on the gross profit that you've lost for the next 6 months. Let's see what else they've got in here. FAQs, they're processing applications as soon as possible. And again, I've told all my clients, it's going to take a while. This is not plan A to get your money back. You need to be thinking about other things to do to try to survive between now and however long it takes to get your EIDL loans approved and funded. But this is just, this program, the $10,000 is supposed to happen pretty quickly. But if you come in with a $500,000, $700,000, $800,000 loan request, that's not going to be funded tomorrow. It's just not going to be. So let's see, there's some other, I'm going to just kind of scroll through these. There's some FAQs. I'm not going to get into the details just for interest of time, but you can certainly pause it and read the rest of it. This particular PowerPoint came out of the West Virginia SBA office, but it is on the SBA's main website as the tutorial for the EIDL loan.
Okay.
So
one question, let's say I'm a small business owner and I'm going to be entitled to receiving some of the stimulus dollars. I think they're the $1,200 checks. Will that in any way either disqualify me for either of the two loan programs we've talked about to this point, or reduce what I'm entitled to receive? Those are completely separate,
completely
correct?
separate.
Correct. And you don't have to apply for those either. So.
Right.
Okay, those are in theory the checks in the mail on those.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate the information so far. If you're watching a three-part series, we just finished up our second part, which was the Small Business Administration disaster loans, the EIDL or EIDL, as they've become known. Hopefully, though the government's not idle on processing them. And we're about to step in our third series. We're going to step over and talk about a Florida loan that was created from the Department of Economic Opportunity. Much smaller number of dollars, I think $50 million. again, that are in play there. But still, if you're considering all of your options out there, one that's worth taking a look at. So stay tuned. Everybody stay safe and stay healthy.